I didn't think I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office at 67 years old, listening to someone tell me I might lose my own granddaughter. But there I was, hands folded in my lap, trying not to let my voice shake. My name is Irene Good, and I've been raising my granddaughter, Marisol, since she was 4 years old. I want to tell you how we got here. All of it, because people only ever see the ending, the headlines, the numbers, the courtroom. They don't see the Tuesday mornings when I was 53 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor with a little girl who couldn't stop rocking, couldn't stop humming, couldn't understand why the school called her broken. They don't see those years, so I'm going to tell you about them. My daughter Renata was 26 when Marisol was born. She was young, yes, but I didn't think that was the problem. The problem was that Renata had always run from anything hard, even as a child. When things got difficult, she'd find the nearest exit. I loved her, I still love her, but I knew who she was. Marisol's father left before she turned 2. No note, no forwarding address, just gone. And for a while, Renata tried. I'll give her that. She tried for about 2 years. But Marisol was different from other children in ways that were becoming harder to ignore. She'd line up her toys in perfect rows and scream if anyone moved them. She'd memorize entire books, word for word, at 3 years old, but couldn't tell you what she wanted for breakfast. She'd have meltdowns in grocery stores that left both of them on the floor, exhausted people staring. The doctors said it was autism spectrum disorder, moderate to high support needs, they said at first. They also said she had an exceptional pattern recognition ability. Off the charts, one specialist told us. She sees things other people can't see, he said. We just had to figure out how to help her show us. Renata did not want to hear that. I remember the exact day she left. It was a Thursday in October. Marisol was 4 years and 3 months old. I know because I'd just thrown her a birthday party, a small one, just us and 2 neighbors, and Marisol had sat in the corner the whole time, arranging the candles from her cake in a line by height. I thought it was beautiful. Renata thought it was a sign of everything she couldn't handle. She called me that Thursday morning and said she needed a break. Just a few weeks, she said. Could I take Marisol for a little while? I said yes. Of course I said yes. Renata dropped her off with one bag and a car seat. She kissed Marisol on the top of her head. Marisol didn't look up from the floor, where she was tracing the pattern in my linoleum with her finger. I watched my daughter walk back to her car. I watched her pull out of the driveway. And something in me knew. The way you know things when you've been a mother for long enough. I knew she wasn't coming back. The weeks became months. Renata called sometimes. At first every week, then every few weeks, then almost never. She'd moved to Phoenix, she told me, then to Nashville. She was figuring things out, she said. Getting herself together. She sent birthday cards twice, maybe 3 times over the years. There was no child support. I never pushed for it because I didn't want Marisol to be a legal battle. I just wanted her to be a little girl. So that's what we did. We were just 2 people, me and Marisol, in my house in Columbus, Ohio. I want to tell you what those years were like. I retired early from my job as a medical billing specialist. I planned to retire at 65 and travel, maybe see the Pacific Northwest, maybe visit my cousin in Atlanta more often. Those plans disappeared, and I don't say that with bitterness. I say it because it's true, and the truth matters when you're telling a story like this. I learned everything I could about autism. I drove Marisol to occupational therapy twice a week in a town 40 minutes away because it was the only provider in our area who had experience with kids like her. I fought the school district for 3 years to get her an IEP that actually reflected her needs. I sat in meeting after meeting where people spoke about my granddaughter like she was a problem to be managed. I brought documentation. I brought research. I brought a folder 3 inches thick and I put it on the table and I said, this child is not a problem. She is a person. Eventually, they listened. Marisol struggled in ways I won't minimize. There were mornings she couldn't leave the house because the texture of her clothing felt unbearable. There were nights she cried for hours and I couldn't understand why and she couldn't explain it. There were periods, months, sometimes, where the school would call and I'd have to drop everything and go. But here's what I also need to tell you. There was something else happening alongside all of that. Something quiet and steady and extraordinary. Marisol loved patterns, not just in a casual way. She was obsessed. She'd look at a quilt and tell me exactly what the geometric rule was. She'd watch a nature documentary and predict what would happen based on patterns in the animal's behavior. At 8 years old, she started teaching herself coding from a library book. Not because I taught her, not because anyone guided her to it. She just found the book, sat with it for 2 weeks, and then one afternoon showed me something on my old laptop that I didn't understand but knew was remarkable. By 10, she was writing her own programs. Simple ones at first, little applications that sorted things, organized things, found patterns in data. She'd show me and explain them slowly and patiently, the way she did with everything she loved. Her voice changed when she talked about code. The anxiety lifted a little. She became, for those moments, completely herself. I didn't always understand what she was building, but I understood what I was watching. I was watching someone find their language. I saved every dollar I could. When she was 12, I bought her a decent laptop, used, but good. I signed her up for a free online computer science program for kids. She finished it in 6 weeks. I found a mentor program through our local library, a retired software engineer named Harold who volunteered his time on Saturday mornings. He told me after their 3rd session that Marisol was unlike any student he'd ever worked with. Not because she was fast, though she was, but because she asked questions that seemed to come from somewhere deeper, like she was seeing the architecture of the problem, not just the surface. She was 15 when she started building it. I didn't know what it would become. She told me she was building a tool to help people with sensory processing issues plan their days. She'd been thinking about it for years, apparently. A way to track environmental triggers, patterns in mood and overstimulation, and generate schedules that minimize distress. She designed it specifically for people like herself, people who had to navigate a world that wasn't built for their nervous systems. She worked on it every day after school, weekends, some nights until midnight when I'd make her close the laptop and eat something. I asked her once if she wanted to tell anyone else about it. A teacher, maybe. She thought about it for a long moment and then said, "Not yet. I want to get it right first." So we kept it between us. She got it right. When Marisol was 16, she entered a national student technology competition. I drove her to Cincinnati for the regional qualifier. She stood in front of a panel of judges, adults, professionals, and explained her application in a quiet, precise voice without making eye contact with any of them. She didn't perform. She didn't try to be charming. She just explained what she'd built and why, and the room went completely still. She won regionals, then nationals. The prize included a small grant and an introduction to a startup accelerator program in Chicago. I remember sitting in that auditorium in Dallas when they called her name. I remember the way she walked up to the stage. She still had to wear her noise-canceling headphones because of the crowd, and accepted the award with both hands and looked at it for a long time before she said anything. When she finally spoke into the microphone, she said, "I built this for everyone who ever felt like the world was too loud. I hope it helps." I was crying before she finished the sentence. The accelerator program was 6 months. I drove her to Chicago every other weekend because she couldn't make the trip alone yet. She worked with a team of mentors who helped her develop a business plan, refine the application, and prepare to bring it to market. One of the investors in the program expressed interest early. By the time Marisol was 17, she had a licensing deal. The application was called ClearPath. It was distributed through healthcare providers and school districts and mental health platforms across the country. I don't remember the exact moment I understood what it had become financially. It happened gradually. First the licensing fees, then the partnerships, then the acquisition offer from a larger health tech company. Marisol was 18 when she signed the acquisition. The final deal was valued at $2.8 million. She came home that evening and sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same kitchen table where she'd spent years doing homework and eating the same 4 foods she could tolerate and teaching me everything she knew about the world she was building in her head. And she said, "Grandma, I want to give you half." I told her absolutely not. I told her that money was hers, that she'd built it. She said, "You built me, so it's the same thing." I didn't argue after that. We sat there for a while without saying anything, and outside it was starting to snow. That light early snow you get in Ohio in November. And I thought about the Thursday in October, 14 years earlier, when my daughter had driven away and left a 4-year-old girl tracing patterns in my linoleum floor. I thought about everything that had happened in between. I thought, it's enough. Whatever comes next, this is enough. But something came next. I don't know exactly how Renata found out. News travels, I suppose. There had been an article about Marisol in a local paper after the Nationals win. Then a brief mention in a technology newsletter after the acquisition. Maybe someone told her. Maybe she searched. She called me on a Wednesday in February. I hadn't heard her voice in almost 4 years. She said, "Mom, I'd been thinking about Marisol. I want to reconnect." I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, "What changed?" She said, "A lot of things. I've done a lot of work on myself. I'm in a better place. I think I'm ready to be in her life." I said, "Renata, she's 18 now. That's her decision to make, not mine." Renata said, "Of course. I just wanted to reach out to you first." Out of respect, I said I would pass along the message. I told Marisol that evening. I sat down with her, and I told her that her mother had called and wanted to reconnect, and that there was no right or wrong answer, and that whatever she decided, I would support her. Marisol was quiet for a long time. She had a small fidget tool she used when she was thinking, a smooth metal ring she turned over and over in her fingers. She turned it over for a while and then she said, "Did she know before she called?" I said, "Know what?" She said, "About ClearPath. About the acquisition." I didn't answer. The answer was in my silence. Marisol nodded slowly. She said, "Okay, I'll think about it." She thought about it for 2 weeks. Then she told me she'd decided she wasn't ready to have contact with her mother. She said she might feel differently someday, but right now the relationship didn't feel safe, and she needed to protect her energy for the work she was doing. I relayed that to Renata. Renata was not gracious about it. She called back several times over the next month. Each time the tone shifted a little. She started asking questions about the acquisition, about the money, about whether Marisol had a financial advisor, whether anyone was looking out for her interests, whether the terms of the deal had been properly reviewed. I told her that Marisol had legal representation and that her affairs were in order. Then, in April, I got a letter from an attorney in Phoenix. The letter stated that Renata was asserting a claim to a portion of Marisol's acquisition proceeds on the basis of parental rights. It cited Arizona statutes. It used words like equitable interest and parental contribution, and it was written in language designed to be confusing. But the meaning was clear. My daughter was claiming that because she was Marisol's legal parent, she was entitled to a share of what Marisol had earned. Marisol was 18. She was an adult. She had built ClearPath over 3 years entirely on her own. Renata had not spoken to her in 14 years and had provided nothing. Not money, not presents, not so much as a phone call on her graduation day from 8th grade. And now there was a letter from a lawyer. I sat at my kitchen table with that letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I was past the age of crying over my daughter's choices, but I felt something cold move through me because I understood what this was. This wasn't a mother trying to reconnect with her child. This was something else entirely. I called our family attorney, a woman named Carol who I'd used for my will and a property issue years before. Carol read the letter and called me back within the hour. She said, "Irene, this is going to require a specialist. And I want to be honest with you, depending on how this is filed, there may be some exposure here." I said, "What does that mean?" She said, "Parental rights in this context are complicated. Marisol is a legal adult, so there's no custody component. But there are theories of recovery that attorneys sometimes pursue in situations like this, unjust enrichment claims, things like that. I want to refer you to someone who handles this specifically." I said, "Carol." She abandoned her daughter when she was 4 years old. Carol said, "I know, and we'll say that. But I want you to be prepared." We met with the specialist a week later. His name was David Park. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40. With reading glasses, he kept pushing up his nose in a way of explaining things that didn't make me feel stupid. He reviewed everything. The letter, the timeline, my records of Renata's absence, the school documents, the therapy receipts, the competition records. He said, "Ms. Good, the claim they're making is aggressive, and I believe it's largely without merit. But I want you to understand that litigation is unpredictable, and opposing counsel is going to try to paint a picture of a concerned parent who was shut out of her daughter's life." I said, "She wasn't shut out. She left." He said, "I know, and we have documentation to support that. But I need to ask you something. Is there anything in your records, any communications, any agreements, that could be interpreted as you discouraging contact between Renata and Marisol?" I thought about it carefully. I said no. I'd always told Marisol the truth, that her mother was figuring things out, that she loved her in her own way, that someday things might be different. I had never spoken badly about Renata to Marisol. Not once. I'd kept every card Renata ever sent. I'd saved every voicemail. David said, "Good. That matters." Then he said, "There's one more thing I need to tell you. Marisol's going to need to be involved in this. If she's willing to give a statement about the nature of her relationship with her mother, or the absence of it that will carry significant weight." I said, "I'll ask her. But I want you to understand something about my granddaughter. She doesn't perform for people. She doesn't say things she doesn't mean. If she speaks, it'll be the truth." He said, "That's exactly what we need." I went home and I sat Marisol down and I told her everything. I told her about the letter and the attorney and the claim and what it meant. I told her it might require her to be present for some of this. I told her I was sorry. I told her I was going to fight this with everything I had. She listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a while, turning her ring over in her fingers. Then she looked up at me. She'd gotten better about eye contact over the years, though she still found it uncomfortable. And she said, "Grandma, I know what she's doing, and I've been expecting something like this since February." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "I started keeping records the day you told me she called. Every text, every call, every communication from her or her representatives. I documented the timeline, cross-referenced it with the news coverage of the acquisition, and created a file." I looked at her. She said, "You taught me to document things. You always had your folder for the school meetings. You always had your records. I just did the same thing." I didn't know what to say. I put my hand over my mouth because I didn't trust my voice. She said, "Mom." She called me Mom sometimes, had since she was about 10, and every time it still made something in my chest go quiet and full at the same time. She said, "I'm going to be okay. And so are you. I just need you to let me handle some of this." The case took 4 months to resolve. I won't walk you through every detail because some of it is still difficult to hold, but I'll tell you the important parts. Renata's attorney filed in Ohio, which complicated things for them considerably since that was where Marisol had been raised and where the relevant history existed. David argued that Marisol was a legal adult who had created an independent business without any contribution from Renata, financial, emotional, or otherwise. He presented 14 years of documentation, school records, therapy invoices, competition registrations, all in my name. He presented the complete absence of any record of Renata providing financial support, correspondence, or care during that period. Renata took the stand and said she had tried to stay involved but had been prevented from doing so. David asked her to provide evidence of these attempts. She provided 3 text messages. Over 14 years. 3. David then submitted, with Marisol's permission, a written statement that Marisol had prepared herself. It was 4 pages. It was precise, factual, and completely devastating. She did not use emotional language. She didn't have to. She simply laid out the chronology, the last time she'd seen her mother, the number of times she had heard from her, the dates, the gaps, the silence. It read like code, like a program that documented exactly what had run and what had failed to run and where. At the end of the statement, she wrote 1 paragraph that wasn't about facts. She wrote, "I do not say any of this with anger. I built ClearPath because I understand what it means to exist in the world that doesn't account for how you process things. I built it for people who needed something that didn't exist yet. The work was mine. The years were mine. And the person I became was shaped by the grandmother who stayed. There was a settlement conference before it went to a full trial. Renata's attorneys, I think, understood by then what they were up against. The settlement was in our favor. Renata received nothing. The case was closed. The day it was over, I picked up Marisol from her apartment. She'd moved into her own place a few months earlier, a small one-bedroom in the Short North neighborhood in Columbus, and we went to our favorite diner, the one we'd been going to since she was 7. She always ordered the same thing: scrambled eggs, wheat toast, orange juice with no pulp. The familiarity of it has always been part of why she liked it. We sat across from each other and neither of us said anything for a while. Then she said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I think so. I think I will be." She said, "I know you still love her." I said, "I do. I don't know how not to." She said, "I know. I've thought about that a lot. Whether I'm supposed to feel something about her, whether the absence of feeling is its own kind of grief. I'm still figuring that out." I said, "You've got time." She said, "I know." She looked out the window at the street. Then she said, "I want to use some of the money to expand ClearPath. There are a lot of school districts that can't afford the current licensing model. I want to build a free version." I said, "That sounds right." She said, "And I want to take you somewhere. You said you always wanted to see the Pacific Northwest." I said, "Marisol." She said, "You gave up a lot of years. I can't give them back. But I can give you a trip to Oregon." I laughed. I can't help it. Even in the middle of everything, the months of lawyers and documents and the particular grief of watching your child try to do something so small and ugly, she could still make me laugh. I am 67 years old. I did not plan the life I've had. I planned to work until 65, retire comfortably, maybe take up watercolor painting. Instead, I spent 14 years learning about sensory integration therapy and IEP amendments and the particular beauty of a mind that sees the world in patterns no one else can recognize. I don't tell this story because I want anyone to feel sorry for me. I tell it because there are other grandmothers and grandfathers and aunts and uncles and neighbors and foster parents who are doing what I did, quietly, without recognition. Showing up every Tuesday morning, every school meeting, every specialist appointment. Staying when someone else left. I want them to know that the staying matters, even when it's hard, even when no one sees it. Even when the system isn't built for the child in your care and you have to fight for every accommodation, every resource, every small acknowledgement that your grandchild is not a problem to be solved, but a person to be known. The staying matters. Marisol is 19 now. ClearPath is in over 400 school districts. She's in the early stages of a second application, something to do with workplace accommodations for adults with sensory processing differences. She explained it to me last Sunday over the phone, and I understood about a third of it, and I told her so. And she laughed and said that was okay. She'd explain the rest when she had a prototype. She calls me every Sunday, without fail. Has since she moved out. I told her once that she didn't have to do that. That I didn't want her to feel obligated. She said, "Grandma, I call because I want to, not because I have to." That's the thing about people who mean what they say. You believe them. I believe her. I've thought a lot about what this story actually means. Not the legal part, not the money part. Those things resolve themselves in the end the way things tend to when the truth has been documented carefully and kept safe for years. What I keep coming back to is something simpler. Something I didn't have a name for while I was living it, but can see clearly now that I'm on the other side. Every choice has a weight to it, not in a mystical sense. I'm not talking about fate or anything like that. I mean something more practical than that. I mean that the things we do and the things we don't do accumulate. They pile up quietly over years, and eventually you find yourself standing in the middle of everything you built, or everything you abandoned, and you have to reckon with it. Renata made her choices. She chose to leave when Marisol was 4. She chose silence for 14 years. She chose to reappear not when her daughter graduated, not when her daughter won a national competition, but in the weeks after a business acquisition made the news. Those choices didn't go anywhere. They just waited. And when she walked into a courtroom trying to claim something she hadn't earned, every one of those choices was already there waiting to testify against her. That's not punishment. That's just how life works. You don't get to skip the years and collect the harvest. And Marisol, my granddaughter who couldn't tolerate the texture of certain socks until she was 9, who used to line up her pencils by length before she could start her homework, who learned to code from a library book because her brain needed a language the world hadn't handed her yet. She understood something that took me much longer to understand. She understood that integrity isn't just about being honest when it's easy. It's about being precise when it matters. It's about doing the quiet work, when no one is watching, and keeping the records, and trusting that the truth, documented carefully, is its own defense. She didn't fight with anger. She didn't perform for anyone. She just told the truth clearly, in 4 pages, and let the facts do what facts do. I think about the kind of character it takes to do that. To face the person who left you, who looked at you at 4 years old and decided you were too hard, and to respond not with rage, but with documentation, not with collapse, but with clarity. That's not something I taught her in any direct way. I think it came from years of having to navigate a world that wasn't built for her nervous system and choosing every single day to figure it out anyway. To build the thing that didn't exist yet. To keep going. What I know now, at 67, is that the children who are hardest to raise are sometimes the ones who teach you the most about what it means to stay. I stayed because she needed me to, but somewhere along the way, watching Marisol become herself, I started to understand something about my own life too, about the value of showing up consistently for the things and the people that matter, even when no one is keeping score, even when the work is invisible, even when the outcome is uncertain. The staying was never wasted, not one day of it.